a collection of short, real dogman and werewolf sightings and encounters in 2023. Story number 1. Dogman in the Selinsgrove Woods. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Selinsgrove, PA is the tiny town I grew up in and around, and it's where I saw my one and only cryptid that I've ever seen in my entire life, which was a dogman, in case you aren't patient enough to wait till I get to that part. It's important that you understand where Selinsgrove is placed on the globe for this story to make sense. It's right on the Susquehanna River, which runs north-south in that region, and it's just to the east and north of a chain of mountains that extends down into West Virginia. That mountain chain has been a place where people have experienced more strange phenomena and seen more impossible monsters than any other place I'm aware of. Maybe Skinwalker Ranch out west is another place with a reputation like this place. To get to those mountains, you need to head west from Selinsgrove, and there are two main highways that will allow you to do that. Route 35 and Route 522, see? And in between those two roads is this big, unnamed forest area. Unnamed as far as I know, anyway. I'm not sure if it's government-owned or private or what it is, but in my opinion, there are a number of kinds of cryptids living inside those woods. If they don't live there, then there must be a portal in those woods or something, like an interdimensional bus depot. I used to have a group of friends who would sneak off to those woods, and they all told me at least one story each about seeing weird things in there. Usually it was Bigfoot, and he was the one I most wanted to see. One of my friends said they saw a pterodactyl at dusk, and when it got darker out, the pterodactyl started glowing, like his wings sort of glowed in the dark. That was the weirdest story I ever heard, but the guy insisted he wasn't BSing us. He sure seemed to be serious about his giant glow-in-the-dark dino bird. It is sort of a weird thing to try and make up, I guess, so maybe you really did see it. What I saw was pretty weird too, but it was a creature that Pennsylvania has sort of become known for. I saw the Pennsylvania Dogman, and I saw it in the woods to the west of Selinsgrove. But it wasn't just like a Dr. Meldrum animal sighting. It was an entire supernatural type experience. Okay, this next part is going to make some people angry. I've been telling this story all year, and people always get angry about this next part. Me and my friend Aubrey were playing with a Ouija board, and we asked to talk to a cryptid. I understand now that this was a stupid thing to do because I've been lectured and lectured about it. But at the time, I just thought it was sort of like the internet, only psychic. I wanted a cryptid experience, so I tried to sort of go online and order one for delivery, you might say. It didn't seem like such a big deal to me. I mean, Ouija boards are made by Parker Brothers, not by a weapons manufacturer. How was I supposed to know that something might go wrong? I mean, you don't even have to plug that thing in. So I didn't really expect it to be able to do anything. But it started to spell out words phonetically, usually misspelling stuff. We were getting a message from it about trees and nature, but we weren't really understanding it. When Aubrey started to ask it yes or no questions, it started to make more sense. Questions like, "Are you a ghost?" To which it replied, "No." "Are you alive?" It said yes. "Are you human?" "No." We asked if it wasn't human, then what was it? And it started to fly around the board choosing random letters that didn't spell anything out. I wanted to see a Sasquatch, and I had heard they were psychic, so I asked if it was a Bigfoot. It said no, but only after a bit of a pause. Aubrey asked if he was a dogman and laughed as he said it, but the planchette went directly to yes, and I mean directly. It did not pass go, and it did not collect $200. We made plans with the dogman to meet by the hanging tree, which is what we call a bent tree in those woods. I don't know if anyone was ever really hung there, but it looked spooky, so we call it that. The two of us were excited as we showed up, but once I was there, I have to admit that I wanted to go back to Aubrey's home. It seemed like a better idea in my head than it seemed in reality to go to this place, if you know what I mean. And then we heard the woods crackling, and we heard branches parting. And then out of those woods walked this big, nasty-looking dogman. A killer, if ever there was one. It had more muscle than 3 professional wrestlers, and its eyes looked like they were on fire. Its ears stood up like you would expect, but it walked like a man. Not a human man, though. Some kind of hellish, cursed, unholy man. It opened its mouth as if it were going to say something, but this raspy sound came out instead. And I lost it. I screamed like a little girl when I am a 20-year-old guy. And Aubrey started running away as soon as I started screaming. When I saw him leaving, I ran twice as fast away from there. I know I was the one who had arranged this meeting, but I guess I hadn't really thought it through. We could hear that big thing running after us for a while. It sounded like it was calling out to us, but I couldn't understand what it was saying. Of course, I was running as hard as I could, and I was not stopping to listen. We got away and we thought that was the end of it, but Aubrey says the thing shows up outside his window at night, and it says things to him that sound like gibberish. It has this expression on its face, like it's telling him something important, but it never makes any sense. And then it runs away. Aubrey blames me for the fact that he's bothered by the creepy supernatural dogman, but I can't be held responsible for the dogman in the Selinsgrove Woods. Story 2, Gas Station in Lock Haven. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Here's a Pennsylvania dogman story from earlier this year. It was coming out of winter and heading into spring, and the weather was sort of a lot like it is now in autumn, really. I think it was in the 50s that night, so a little chilly, but nothing that's going to freeze your icicles on you or anything. But instead of the leaves turning orange and yellow, most of the trees were still bare, or maybe just at the first stages of starting to sprout, you know? I was driving up north toward the Bucktail State Park Natural Area and State Game Lands 89, but I was still in civilization when this happened. I was at the intersection of Susquehanna and Hill, where there's this little gas station. Everything else around there is private homes, and off in the distance you can see the Pennsylvania hills. Those are the hills of mystery, I'm telling you. So it was dark out, and I'd filled up my car and got inside the office to pay. Then I got the bathroom key and walked around the back to take a whiz. When I walked into that bathroom, it smelled even worse than you would expect a gas station bathroom to smell. I felt like retching, but I really had to pee. So I took a few steps into this dark, smelly hellhole of a public restroom, looking for the urinals. Before seeing those, though, I saw the dogman. It looked like some kind of avenging satanic angel or something. It was standing there perfectly still, as though it had been waiting for me for 1,000,000 years. It almost looked like a statue, but statues don't smell that horrible. And then the thing tilted its hideous head up, slightly. And our eyes met. Its eyes looked like they were from hell itself, and I don't see why they might not have been. I screamed like a cat being gutted, and I felt the warm yet cold sensation running down my leg. Well, it didn't seem like I needed to use the men's room anymore, did it? No, it didn't. So I ran. I ran back to the car, and I could hear that monster coming out after me. I ran straight to my car, jumped in, and locked all the doors before I even looked back. I saw the beastman standing silhouetted against this pale red or maybe pink house, and then it walked off behind the gas station. I waited a minute. Then I drove on to Susquehanna, and down just a little ways, so I could look down where I saw the monster walking. It looked to me like he was drinking water from a swimming pool. So I fished around looking for where I'd left my phone on the other seat. By the time I grabbed it, the dogman had gone away though. I doubt I would have been able to get a clear photo in the dark anyway. Not from inside my car at least. And you couldn't have paid me to go back out there on that night. I still stop at that place to get gas from time to time. But I will never again bother the dogman as he's doing his duty inside the gas station in Lock Haven. And story number 3. The Hound of Hempfield. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Not too far to the east and south of Pittsburgh is a creepy little forest between little towns with names like Adamsburg and Fort Allen. It's an area called Hempfield Township, a place named for hemp, which is also known as cannabis. It was once the most important crop when we were still colonies, but not because of the smoking stuff. Because rope and blue jeans and canvas for sails was made from that. In fact, the word canvas derives from the word cannabis, believe it or not. So I figured that must have been a big hemp farm at one time in the past, when it was first settled and named. And now it's a forest of the most enchanted sort. And I mean that in both a good way, in that it's charming and beautiful, and in the bad way, in that it's scary and confusing when it wants to be. It was in that little woodland that I saw and got chased by something that I am pretty convinced must have been a Pennsylvania dogman. If it wasn't some kind of a werewolf, then it must have been Cocaine Bear, because it was thin, it was wiry, and it was faster on 2 legs than any bear has a legal right to be. It was a couple of days after I had been fired from my full-time job in early summer. I had spent a day or 2 looking for another job. Then this was the day I was so frustrated that I went and took a walk in the woods. I was hoping for some peace and quiet, so I could put my head back together like Humpty Dumpty. What I got was not peace and quiet. What I got was a big monster trying to kill and eat me. Sometimes people say they sense that they're being watched, or being chased, before they finally see the dogman. But I had no idea the thing was there, until it jumped out of the bushes at me. I thought it was a chimpanzee at first, but obviously it was not. I never thought it was a Sasquatch. It wasn't as large as I would have expected one of those to be. That's not to say it was small. It was over 6 feet, because that's my height, and this was a bit taller than I am. This dog-headed monster seemed to delight in terrifying me. It screeched, and it bluff-charged me over and over again. It seemed to think all of this was funny. I thought it acted more like an ape than a dog. But in either case, it was a bully, and it was rude. I think he planned on eating me, but he was going to tire me out first. I didn't like this creature in the slightest. I tried to punch him, but he was too quick for me to land a fist. I tried to hit him with a stick, but he grabbed it away from me and spanked me with it. Whatever I did, he could undo 3 times faster, and I was running out of ideas. I was already out of breath. The dogman started chasing me out of the woods, and I was having a harder and harder time keeping ahead of him. I was crying and blubbering when I suddenly wandered out of the woods and walked face first into a cop. The dogman wisely remained in the woods somewhere behind, while the offended officer wiped my bodily fluids off of himself and took me in for questioning. Basically, I was being arrested for annoying the officer, but I was fine with that, because it sure beat the alternative. I wouldn't have even minded if I got locked up overnight on that night. It didn't come to that, but I did get taken downtown and bellowed at for a while. The arresting officer felt I was acting suspicious, But I was so grateful to be inside and safe. They eventually gave up on me and let me go. And that's my personal story about how I got chased by the Hound of Hempfield.
If you want a coloring book full of monstrous delight, then give this a look. It'll give you a fright, right? Scary stories, coloring book, werewolf coloring book. And just to make your mind explode, it's a digital download. All it costs is $2.09, and then you will be feeling fine. Coloring monsters today, hey, it's a coloring book, hooray. Okay, link is in the description.
I used my monthly Audible credit to snag myself a free copy of this audiobook by Linda Godfrey called Monsters Among Us. She's got some truly weird Hollywood werewolf stories in it that I never heard before, and I really wanted to illustrate and share some of these supposedly true urban werewolf stories with you guys. Now, throughout the beginning of this book, Godfrey spends a lot of time going into the fact that there are all sorts of tunnels under Los Angeles and that part of California. There's a subway system that was entirely dug out and then abandoned, for one thing. There are also legends of far older tunnels built by a people that the natives called the Lizard People. Now, before YouTube bans my video, that doesn't mean the people were lizards. It means that was the name of that clan. They identified with lizards, according to legend. I don't know how much of that is legend or fact, and unlike Godfrey, I'm not 100% certain it matters either way. She's seeing these sightings as being of creatures separate from humans, who need a habitat near where they've been sighted. But what if these are not dogmen? What if these are what she calls morphers? What if they're werewolves and not dogmen? Then the habitat they would sleep in would be the apartment next to yours, not some ancient tunnel system underground. I'll give you some examples of her Los Angeles werewolf stories, and you tell me if these are dogman sightings, werewolf sightings, or some other third thing. Let's start it off with the Tessa Dick werewolf story, or a dogman story if you think so, you decide. Tessa is the widow of the great science fiction visionary author Philip K. Dick, and this story happened shortly after her husband's untimely passing at the age of 53 in 1982. Tessa was attending college at Chapman University at the time. She was 28 years old when this happened. While driving her car, she stopped at a red light in El Modena in Orange County. As she sat waiting for the light to change, Tessa says she saw a big black limo roll up next to her, with its tinted windows up. It was a warm day and Tessa had no air conditioning in her car, so her windows were down. Philip K. Dick unfortunately did not become rich and famous until after he was gone. Most of that money went to his children, and Tessa had to fend for herself. While she watched, the back seat window of the limo rolled down, and she found herself looking into the vehicle at a dark canine, which resembled a German shepherd to some degree. She could see the well-groomed creature's head, but not its body. Being an animal lover, Tessa smiled at the dog, and she said the intelligent-looking beast smiled back at her. She thought to herself that the owner of that limo was lucky to have such a beautiful dog. But then something unexpected happened. Just as the light was turning green, the dog, or whatever it was, casually put its arm up on the window to rest it. Although as dark as the rest of him, the arm was human, not canine. It ended in a human hand, not a dog paw. Tessa was stunned and looked up to find the canine-headed man making an expression back at her, which she describes as a smirk. He seemed to be enjoying her shocked expression. The arm had an elbow and a shoulder like a human, and it was covered in very fine black fur, like a dog's front leg. The hand, however, appeared to be hairless from what she could briefly see. If it was wearing any clothing, she didn't notice it from her angle. Tessa says she was not frightened, but she was Philip K. Dick's widow, so she must have become used to fantastic visions. I like to think that this was Anubis himself come to let her know that Phil was being accommodated in fashion in the afterlife. As the light changed to green and they both drove away, Tessa no longer felt the owner of that limo was the dog's master. She felt the dog itself must have owned that limo. Now, does that sound like a Dogman story? Or does that sound like a werewolf story? Well, here's another one. This happened in MacArthur Park, the one they wrote that famous song about. You know, the one where it's melting in the dark, as Donna Summer and Richard Harris sang in the previous century. In fact, the song was only written a handful of years before this next event took place in 1972. A woman named Mary May gave this report to Linda Godfrey 42 years later in 2014. She's supposed to be a former actress, and I did put the name in IMDb. I found a few possibilities, but no photos for any of the women. So Mary was out for a romantic walk with her then-boyfriend, and they wandered into the park from its entrance on Alvarado and 6th Street just as the sun was setting. As the couple walked south into the park, from the west to their right came a figure running fast, in a manner that for some reason frightened the witness Mary. She pulled back a little, hoping the running figure would pass them by without paying them any attention and ruining the mood. In fact, the figure turned a bit to the right as it passed them and began heading in the direction of Wilshire Boulevard to its right and directly in front of the witness. As it ran, she saw it had the head of a wolf. The sighting was brief, and she failed to make note of what kind of clothing it had on or if it even had any on. She thinks it had shoes, but she isn't sure, because her eyes were focused on the tall pointed ears and the long wolf snout sitting up on the shoulders of this rushing fellow. As she watched, the creature or man leaped a park bench as though it were nothing, and then he ran off heading into a tunnel which passes underneath Wilshire Boulevard and out of their sight. She never mentioned it to her boyfriend because she wanted to get back to their private time, so she never really knew if he even noticed the same thing that she had. Godfrey at this point speaks again about the possibility that the creature was heading to some underground tunnel system, but from what I can see on Google Maps, it just looks like a way to cut through from one side of the park to the other, where there's a lake located. Maybe there is or was a secret door to the mysterious and possibly partially mythical Los Angeles underworld in that underpass. Sort of like in this next and final true Hollyweird Dogman story for today. This one took place in Torrance, in a small outdoor shopping mall with a laundromat in it, back in the 1980s. A woman who was a girl at the time said that her mother had bought her and her older brother a ball, and they got permission to go behind the laundromat to this area that seemed empty of cars to play with their new ball. Her brother would throw the ball high up in the air and she would try to catch it. One time it got away from her and rolled to this back alcove area, set a bit apart from the rest. As she got the ball all the way back in the corner, the girl heard a noise behind her and turned around to find the shock of her life. There was some kind of a metal door in the sidewalk, and out of it had sprung a very angry man, asking her what all the noise was about. She'd been told never to speak to strangers, so the girl stood there terrified and frozen, with her brother off beyond this strangely dressed man. He was wearing clothes that seemed to be from another time. Suddenly the odd old-fashioned looking man began saying, "Oh no, not now," and acting as though he were having some kind of an attack. The girl claims he called her by her first name of Jennifer, which she had never told him. And then that he became a hairy-faced werewolf in front of her eyes. Her brother, who was twice the girl's age, distracted the werewolf climbing out of the metal doorway in the ground long enough for his sister to make it past him. Then both of them ran around to the front of the laundromat, leaving their prized new ball behind with the creature. The two ran into the laundromat shouting at the adults that it was time to evacuate. that a werewolf was coming after them. And the adults found it quite amusing. She claims her brother admits that he saw what he saw, but he won't go on the record saying so. I wonder what she saw, and she claims she does too. Years later, she went back and saw that they had completely redone the back of the shopping center, so that there is no more mysterious metal door in the middle of the sidewalk, for whatever weird reason. She still had the creeps until she got back out of there, though. If a place spooks you once, it's likely always going to put you on edge whenever you return. So those were 3 weird dog-headed people sightings in the Los Angeles area. But what were those sightings of, really? Were they dogmen? Were they werewolves? Were they something else that you'd only find out there in La La Land? Could they have been hoaxes or people wearing masks? Magicians performing tricks in public? If you have any theories about any of these 3 strange cases tonight, please leave your ideas in the comments. And if you would like to read more about these true stories, they're in Chapter 2, Liminal Los Angeles, of Linda Godfrey's book Monsters Among Us. We've got a link to get yourself a copy, which recently has become less expensive in price, which is in our description for this video. If you use that link, you help this channel out, so we thank you in advance. And speaking of thanks, here comes Bigfoot to thank this episode's executive producer. Biggie? For executive producing and all that jazz, you can't do better than Mary Shabazz. Please join us in thanking Mary Shabazz for making this episode possible. Mary is a top-tier member of our channel memberships. That means she gets to see all our secret, uncensored stories, plus lots of other perks that I can't even tell you about unless you're also a top-tier member. Here to explain it all in more detail is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.